Whistling 5 Anarchic Productions proudly presents Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s stories, as told by Andrew Brammer. Hello and welcome. The story you are about to hear is written and told using its original source materials, scribblings and scratchings from the scrawls of Stumpy, found within Stumpy Sanderson's time capsule, which was buried in 1979 and then unearthed in 2019. The story is told in the first person, as I, just like Stumpy, witnessed at first hand the momentous events which it recounts. So let's park up our rally choppers and tomahawks and take a ride back to 1974 for the strange case of Smiler Morton. Smiler Morton had the biggest smile that anyone had ever seen. A huge gapped-toothed crescent set within a small moon of a face, complemented by UFO-shaped eyes and shrub-like hair. And no matter what the circumstances, no matter how great the predicament, nothing could ever remove that smile from Smiler's face. On so many occasions had an ugly customer of a teacher shouted, "I'll wipe that smile off your face, lad!" only to give up exasperated at Smiler's beaming countenance, which would still be radiating back, even after the most severe thrashing had just been administered. And nothing made Smiler's smile even larger, his grin even wider, than when he was accepting and carrying out a dare. Whenever someone had thrown down a challenge such as, "I dare someone to ride their bike over the headmaster's flower beds," straight away it would always be Smiler who would say, "I'll do it!" And then, grinning like a village idiot, he would proceed to execute the required act of stupidity. But every great dare needed a fiendish mind to think of it in the first place. And the best in this dubious business was Gawper Allsop, a loose-limbed lout with hooded eyes, hair like a bag of worms, and a jaw that seemed as if it was weighed down with a magnet. The possessor of a rogue's brain that was totally barren to learning, yet which was a fertile breeding ground for twisted ideas. Over the years, Gawper and Smiler had worked together as a great double act. Gawper devising the daredevil tasks and Smiler volunteering and then carrying them out. For instance, when the co-op milkman, who always seemed to spend an inordinate amount of time inside a certain housewife's house, left his milk float outside it yet again, Gawper had said, "I dare someone to nick that milk float." Smiler had duly hopped into the vehicle, put a milk crate on the floor so that he could reach and wedge the accelerator pedal into action, and then, with the oversized steering wheel in his hands, had started to drive the float away. Spotting Smiler from the upstairs window, the milkman had come herring out after him, white coat flapping, tearing up the middle of the road in hot pursuit, Smiler's joyful face providing a beautiful counterpoint to the volcanic red-faced features of the desperate dairyman who, when Smiler finally dived out of the vehicle, was left chasing his float as it trundled off down a slightly sloping street. When we had a geography field trip to the local lime quarry and found a huge tractor tyre in the long grass, Gawper had said, "I dare someone to get inside that tyre and be rolled down the quarry." 7 of us had managed to put the tyre into a standing position, watch Smiler crawl inside it, then proceed to roll it down the huge slope. Rolling faster and faster, the tyre had gathered speed at a tremendous rate, and, when it finally crashed into a huge pile of limestone down at the bottom of the quarry, Smiler, dazed and dizzy but grinning like a punch-drunk pugilist, had emerged from its inner rim, staggering away, tugging a forelock at the stunned and startled quarrymen as they looked on, bewildered. But for Smiler and Gawper's masterpiece, we have to go back to a day long before the time of health and safety. A hot, humid and heavy day on which you could almost feel the electricity in the air. The day when 2 gravel-faced workmen who were spending the week repairing the roof of B Block had just driven off somewhere in their van and had left their tall ladder leaning up against the side wall of the block. A day when Gawper Allsop had uttered those unforgettable words to Smiler Morton, "I dare someone to bunk off French, get up that ladder, and jump around on the roof like a lunatic." A day when Smiler's smile grew to the size of a large crescent wedge of Dutch Edam cheese, and he had said, "I'll do it." So, Stumpy Sanderson, Gawper Allsop and I now sat in our French class on the top floor of B block, keyed up at the thought of the dare about to take place. However, Smiler decided to keep us in suspense and did not actually start his performance until there were only about 15 minutes of the lesson remaining. It was then, just as we were engaged in silent vocab, that from above a heavy and resonant thudding suddenly began to sound, shaking the light fittings, filling the room with an echoing reverberation. Boom, 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 boom. It sounded as if someone was stomping across the ceiling in deep-sea diver's boots. Rapidly, the sound carried the length of the classroom and then started back again. Boom, 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 boom. Mrs. Critcher, that razor-tongued gorgon with a withered walnut face, almost dropped her marking pen in astonishment. The girls looked bewildered, while the boys immediately started grinning and excitedly elbowing and nudging each other. The sound was thunderous. Smiler must have been jumping with all his force with those huge rubber-soled platform shoes of his. Indeed, he was jumping so hard that Stumpy, Gawper and I half expected him to come crashing through the ceiling. A rising hubbub of chatter and exclamations quickly began. The rest of the class was thinking, "What is up there on the roof? What on earth are those workmen playing at? Or is it something more sinister, perhaps some huge and hideous creature?" By now, Mrs. Critcher was running up and down the room, following the progress of the booming sound, trying to fathom its source, her whiplash hair flying, nutcracker nose and chin almost touching as she cackled manically, "Quiet, you cretins!" Stumpy, Gawper and I were by now doubling up with laughter as the booming continued, covering every square foot of the floor. But then, a tragic mistake, when Gawper let slip, "Good old Smiler!" It only took Mrs. Critcher an instant to deduce what was going on. She looked at Gawper, quickly digested the comment he had made, saw Stumpy and me trying to suppress our mirth, noticed for the first time Smiler Morton's empty seat, and realised that foul play was afoot. "Morton! I might have known! I'm off to get the headmaster!" As she tore off out of the room, we all rushed en masse to the window to watch her broomstick progress. But in that awful moment, Gawper, Stumpy and I realised that something was terribly wrong. For while Smiler's stomping above us was growing even louder and more frantic, we spotted the workmen across the way loading their ladder onto their van and beginning to drive off. The end of lesson bell went and we tore out of the class, down the stairs and into the quadrangle where a mass of pupils was milling about. Suddenly someone shouted and pointed, "Look, up on the roof! B block!" And as if by intuition, everyone's eyes turned as one to the sight of a small lone figure standing atop the block. Someone else shouted, "It's Smiler Morton!" A great cheer went up, and, realising he now had a ready-made audience, and taking this as his cue, Smiler saw his chance, and, with the darkening sky as his backdrop, began to give us a command performance. He started off with a little jig, followed by a hornpipe, and then, warming to the appreciative crowd, a bizarre version of the Lambeth Walk. Then something more formal, possibly from the French Baroque period. We all wooed as one as he then ran from one end of the roof to the other, skidded, and finished down on one knee with an Al Jolson flourish, arms held out in front of him, hands waving. By now, word had spread like wildfire, and even more pupils had joined the crowd, swelling it to a swarming, cheering and laughing sea, the few ineffectual teachers who were present totally powerless to control its swirl and swell. Smiler's performance must have been going on for a good 5 minutes, when suddenly, as if someone had prodded a wasp's nest, a swarm of senior teachers flew out of admin block onto the scene, headed by that brutal overseer of a headmaster, Mr. Jensen, Mrs. Critcher following in his wake. It was clear Jensen's mercury was rising, for his globular head was incandescent, framing his irradiated hangman's eyes. Jensen put a loud hailer to his mouth. "Morton, stand perfectly still, boy. The caretaker is on his way with his ladder. You'll pay for this, lad. The rest of you, do not encourage this clown and get to your next lessons immediately." By now, the rest of Jensen's Gestapo of senior teachers and prefects had fanned out amongst us, beginning to break up the crowd. Slowly, we began to slink and slope away, delaying our exit for as long as possible, muttering as one beneath our breath. However, whilst Jensen and his henchmen could control the crowd, there was one thing they could not control: the weather. When it started, the rain began with a few heavy spots, then more. Then, without warning, it grew torrential, and suddenly there was a massive and deafening crash of thunder. Taking this as his prompt, Smiler, who was by now soaking wet, ran back to the edge of the roof, stretched out his arms in a bizarre replication of the Vitruvian man, grinned manically, and shouted as loudly as his small lungs could bellow, "Top of the world, Ma!" Because the next events happened so quickly, no single definitive account of them exists, and thus various versions have been passed on down the years. Some swear to this day that as the breathtaking single fork of jagged lightning struck the roof, they saw Smiler light up like a 60,000-watt bulb, his skeleton silhouetted against the blinding flash. Others say that when the lightning hit, they saw nothing but a huge fluorescent smile set against the blackened sky. Others say they saw Smiler's very soul illuminated. What is uncontested is that Smiler fell backwards and we all looked on, horrified. Just as this happened, the rain suddenly stopped, the thunder fell silent, and there was no more lightning. We waited for what seemed an eternity for signs of life. For the first time ever, even Jensen and his brutes looked concerned. Gawper Allsop, knowing it was his dare that had got Smiler up there in the first place, was ashen. And then slowly, like a broken puppet, his hair a patch of blackened chives, faint wisps of smoke rising from his soaking high-waisted trousers, Smiler Morton appeared once again at the edge of the roof. Gawper sank to his knees. "He's alive! He's alive!" Had the shock knocked Smiler over? Or had the lightning actually hit him? If it had he been saved by his ridiculous rubber-soled platform shoes? We would never know. But what we did know was that when the caretaker brought him down, even though he had dodged a meeting with death, and now had an even more deadly appointment with the wrath of Mr. Jensen, Smiler Morton wore an even more enormous smile on his face than any we had previously seen. Thank you for listening to this episode of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories. And don't forget to listen out for Stumpy and Gang's next adventure. For further information on all things Stumpy Sanderson, please visit www.stumpysanderson.co.uk. And you can also check out the Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories YouTube channel. But before we saddle up again on our rally choppers and tomahawks, let's take a listen to the strange little song that was specially written by Stumpy to accompany this podcast's tale. This song is performed for us now by Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s acoustic archive. Let's rock!
We need someone to roll down that quarry, inside that tractor tire. We need a volunteer. Who shall it be? I know, and you know. It's Smiler Morton and Smiler Morton, 'cause he's the one who's always chortling. He's the one with a smile on, that beaming smile, Oh yeah. Smiler Morton and Smiler Morton, yeah, he's the one who's always chortling. He's the one with a smile on, that beaming smile, Oh yeah. We need someone to fly our flag of idiocy. We need a volunteer. Who shall it be? I know, and you know. It's Smiler Morton and Smiler Morton, 'cause he's the one who's always chortling. He's the one with a smile on, that beaming smile, Oh yeah. Smiler Morton and Smiler Morton, yeah, he's the one who's always chortling. He's the one with a smile on, that beaming smile, Oh yeah. Alright now, oh, smile, oh, smile, beam that smile, so we can see it for miles. That never ending smile, that never ending smile, that never ending smile, that never ending